Hello and welcome. Moving or continuing now with the comments and questions from yesterday, and one I skipped through last week and we'll end this week with. I was hoping you might be able to discuss the idea of choice. How can we know what to do when presented with choice? Choice of career, choice of what to eat even. Choice of purpose or path in life. With so much choice in life now, I find myself being unable to choose. Even the most simple things, and it leads me to remorse, lost opportunity, or wasting away. Okay, let me just address this. Often in questions it's said, especially now, in this modern world, in this modern day and age, almost as if in the time of the Buddha, for instance, in this example, there was no choice. There were no distractions. There were no sensual pleasures. Whilst, of course, this was not the case. In the time of the Buddha, there were many distractions and obstacles in the way of practice, albeit of a different nature. But only materialistically and physically. Okay, people were not absorbed in screens during the time of the Buddha. But their thoughts were very much occupied in other forms of sensory desire and what was available to them. The Buddha himself, the Shakyamuni Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was brought up in a luxurious environment. He had a dwelling place for the winter, for the wet season or the cold season, the dry season, various seasons, and everything to hand to entertain him. There was sports, there was archery, there was training for battle and fighting. And then of course there was this always ever-present fear of being attacked and losing what you have, and defense of that, those assets, those existences, very existences and opportunities to live within what you have created, what you've built up, what you have acquired. And this is no different back then than it is today. What is at the root cause of suffering always is greed, hatred, delusion. Lobha, dosa, moha. Doha is a place, isn't it? Lobha, dosa, moha. And greed, hatred and delusion is the root cause of desire, wanting to have something we do not have or wanting to something to be other than it is. And this is no more present today than it was 2,570 years ago in the time of the Buddha, or even a long time before that, from the beginnings of anything, if there is a beginning, or whether there is or whether there isn't. It's neither here nor there. It is desire that, firstly, yes, keeps us going, keeps us defending ourselves, keeps us procreating, and the species in which we've been born into, evolving, as it has evolved to today, to this modern world of many choices. But it's more a case of just different choices. And we even see now how those choices change with modernization. It doesn't mean there's more choice. You know, back in my day, we choose, do we get a Betamax video cassette recorder or do we get a VHS video cassette recorder? Do we listen to our music on an 8-track audio system, hi-fi, or do we go for the more modern cassette version? You know, so many choices. Do we get Dolby in our amplifiers or not have Dolby? You know, all of these little questions, these little choices that have now gone away. You stream whatever you like, wherever you like, in your ears, and everything is taken care of for you. So in some respects, there's less choice. In the time of the Buddha, it was which little quartet or band or orchestra was going to come and play for you this evening, which ladies would come and dance, which gladiators would come and fight lions in front of you, or perform bullfighting in a ring or something horrible like that to entertain the massive crowds. So much choice. So it's no different today than it was then. It's just the choices are different. Now, as for choice, the question of choice, so it is just that. It is to do or not to do something or other, to take or not to take something or other. You have this choice. Now, you specifically say choice of career, choice of what even to eat, choice of purpose or path. The Buddha teaches us one path for us to follow, which is the fourth part of the Noble Eightfold, the fourth part of the Four Noble Truths. So having recognized that greed, hatred and delusion is suffering, is the cause of suffering, this is what the Buddha teaches: suffering and the end of suffering. Just those two things. Just that. There is suffering, there is a cause of suffering, but the good news is there is an end to suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering, which is that Noble Eightfold Path of, in summary, virtue, meditation, wisdom, sila, samadhi, panya, right view, intention, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. That is the path and only path. If we do everything in accordance with and living within the parameters of that Noble Eightfold Path, then we are following the teachings, guidance, direction the Buddha gave us towards Nibbana, complete and total liberation from suffering, freedom from suffering, which can be attained in this lifetime, and no future rebirth into samsara, where we will experience all of this suffering. From choice, it seems, comes a certain amount of suffering, but in an unconditioned deathlessness of something that cannot be described, as it is not of this conditioned world we are used to. We have language for. We have feelings we can describe, compare, experience through these five khandhas, from our body and from our thinking brain. Bodily feeling, sense contact, feelings, vedana, sanya, recollection, memory, sankhara, mental formations, and vijnana, our sense consciousness. This is what builds up this material conditioned world experience. Now, as far as these mundane choices are concerned, it's very easy. It's a very quick answer. I skipped it because of time constraints last time. I think if I'd read the question, I could have answered it very quickly. I could have just said, well, if in doubt, do nout. In other words, if you don't know whether to choose A or B, don't choose either. Neither are important, are they? It won't matter. If one option, A or B, is more important, more urgent, more necessary, you will have to follow that direction. You will have no choice. Where there is a choice, only if you wish, you desire. And be careful to observe with mindfulness, understand, know, pay attention to. Wise attention. Yoniso manisikara. Yoniso manisikara. Wise attention to all of your actions of body, speech and mind, including choice, It's not just mindfulness sati, right mindfulness, that is of knowing all of your actions of body, speech and mind from an observational point of view, but wise attention to what it is you're doing and why. Is it going to fuel that desire for more craving, thirst, wanting, trying to satisfy something that is insatiable, an insatiable desire? Or will it, if it's, for instance, the desire to sit and meditate, attain to samadhi, push aside all of those unwholesome desires, craving and thirst, and therefore, given wise consideration, be something that would be the right choice? How do we know that? We go straight back to the Noble Eightfold Path. Samma Samadhi, yes, it falls within that category. As to whether to speak to somebody about something, that comes under the category of right speech. Right livelihood is even there, when choosing careers, jobs, options. It's all there within the Noble Eightfold Path. But if in doubt, do nout. Let the Noble Eightfold Path, which you're already following as practicing Buddhists, or if not, can do so by simply keeping some very basic codes of conduct, rules, precepts, not commandments. It's not thou shalt do this, thou shalt do that. It's just simply refrain from. And all it is refrain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxicants that dull the mind and may lead to breaching those other precepts. Now I hear people talking about precepts as a big obstacle in their way, a hill to climb. And I've even heard teachers say, well, just be very gentle with yourself and kind and just try and work on keeping one precept and build up to 2 precepts, 3 steps. No, 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 no. What is wrong with anybody if they cannot refrain from killing things? What is wrong with people if they cannot refrain from taking which isn't theirs, stealing? What is wrong with people if they have to go about fornicating everywhere, upsetting people through sexual misconduct? What is wrong with people if they have to lie? Well, what is inherently wrong with them is no sense of virtue, no morality, a completely hedonistic, wrong view. So all of these things outside of the Noble Eightfold Path, outside of its parameters, ran by, fueled by, given momentum, energy of a very negative nature from those defilements, root defilements. I even hear people say, oh, I don't like the word defilements, it sounds perverted and nasty and horrible. Well, yes, greed is perverted and nasty and horrible. Hatred is perverted and nasty and horrible. And delusion is what leads us to having greed and hatred, not understanding how harmful that is. And delusion is what makes people think that, oh, well, it's okay if you break one precept, or, oh, we won't call it defilements, we'll call it a weakness or something like this, or a tendency. They are defiled minds that lead us to greed, hatred, through delusion about ourselves. And this is what the Noble Eightfold Path is going about to destroy those root defilements. Lobha, dosa, moha, greed, hatred and delusion. An arahant, a fully enlightened being, has eradicated completely, cut off at the root, greed, hatred and delusion. So let's not be pathetic about it and say, oh, not defilements again, that's a nasty word. Yeah, if someone goes around raping, stealing, killing, they're a perverted, nasty piece of work, of a defiled nature. We shouldn't hold back on that understanding. That is understanding. Human nature, yes. Now, just before I sat down, the Squeaky Pops, the larger of the boy cats, not kittens anymore, caught a mouse or a small rat, brought it in here, and I thought, oh no, 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 no. And I had to run around clearing up and trying to make sure he didn't take the poor dead creature into my cootie. The cat is not paying wise attention to what it's doing. It's going basically just on its basic instincts for survival, for hunting, gathering food. It did go away and eat the mouse, so it was food, even though he had been fed. It's their natural instinct. But this is a cat. It has a lot of delusion. It's been born into that realm. It doesn't take anything away from how cute he is and how much compassion and metta, loving kindness, metta, compassion, karuna, I have for the same cat whom is seemingly behaving in such a cruel and intolerable manner. We can still have compassion for these people because it's their delusion that prevents them from seeing their defilements, and let's call them that, greed and hatred. So, for example, the cat's not hungry, it's just eaten a whole bowl full of kibbles very quickly, having moaned and squeaked and meowed at me from 3 a.m. until 3:20, until I eventually fed him when I wanted to come in here to sit and talk. But even so, he still goes out of greed to hunt and gather and catch for the thrill of the chase as a result of delusion. And that is what people do all over the world. All of the problems in the world that we can identify, whether it's now or back in the time of the Buddha, are as a result of greed, hatred and delusion. In fact, more simply, they're because humanity, individuals, are unable to just sit quietly in a room, alone, on their own, doing nothing, seemingly. But this is what the practice of meditation teaches us to do from time to time. And this is what the option of the renunciant's life, going forth into homeliness and ordaining as a monk or a nun, a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni, gives people the ability and choice to do. But that, too, is not everyone's choice. And even within that ordained realm, even within the Sangha, there are many choices, apart from those of traditions and schools and religions formed out of Buddhism, of varying descriptions over time and throughout history. Even within those schools and traditions, there are choices. Are you going to study, or are you going to make it more a life of practice in terms of meditation? Are you going to have an emphasis on devotional practices or an emphasis on more renunciation? The Buddha allows us 13 dhutanga, more ascetic practices, for any monks or nuns to take up. But that choice, to some extent, is taken away when you ordain, because we live more strictly within a code of conduct, but it still gives a huge amount of variety. So I choose to have one set of robes, eat just one meal a day, and only eat what I receive going on Pindapata. Now, I would say the majority of monks, who might be village monks, don't observe any of those options, because they have many robes, because they are busy, they work in a temple, and they're teaching, they're studying. They have maybe 2 or 3 meals in the morning, still all before noon, but they have extra supplements in the afternoon, sometimes early evening, considered as medicine. They don't necessarily need to go on Pindapata because the food's brought to them. But that's also okay. These are all choices. So your choices you have. When you're next presented with choice, as you say, are you presented with it? Does someone come up to you like in a restaurant and say, do you want the chocolate flavoured ice cream or the strawberry flavoured ice cream? Maybe they do, yes. If you're not sure, then does it really matter? Close your eyes and just take one. Does it matter is the question when presented with choice, and the answer to any question when presented with choice, as I was told by one wise old monk when I went out, firstly alone, the first time I went out alone as a monk from the monastery, he said, what are you going to do if you're faced with a difficult situation? I said, well, I'm going to have a phone. I'll phone someone, ask someone. And they said, no, just follow the Noble Eightfold Path, because you might not have a phone, it might not work, you might have lost it. And that's very true. I soon did and didn't have. So you just follow the Noble Eightfold Path. When presented with a choice, well, what does the Noble Eightfold Path tell me? And that just means right view, right intention. And that just really boils down to the precepts. Firstly, the Noble Eightfold Path is 4 parts, so 50% virtue, the precepts. The specifics of right view is all about wisdom. In terms of meditation, that forms a part of samasati, samasamadhi, right mindfulness and right concentration. So it's all there for us, laid out, the instructions. And to put it more simply, which will do less harm, yet still be beneficial for me? Which will make less impact on the environment, but still be beneficial for what I'm trying to achieve? Is what I'm trying to achieve for the sake of trying to satisfy greed or aversion, hatred? Is it coming from a place of delusion? Thinking that something, well, I must have chocolate ice cream because it's certainly going to give me much more satisfaction than strawberry ice cream. Frankly, no ice cream is going to help you, particularly. You've probably just had a meal, which was sufficient. So, if in doubt, do nout. Don't have chocolate or strawberry. Don't go one way or the other. Left or right. Stay. Stop. It's only delusion leading you in a direction as a result of greed and hatred, and that delusion is blinkering your vision like a blindfold. You're wandering in the dark. Open your eyes, take off the blinkers and see you're trying to choose where there is no choice. Simply do nothing. Sit and meditate. Take a breath. Move on. That is not wasting away if you are giving that all wise attention. Someone here says, I attend Mahama Noah in Liverpool, which is in fact in Widnes. So this is in the UK, and there are a few dotted. Yes, I looked this up. There's one in Billericay, Essex as well. Yes, there are 2 quite large Theravada Buddhist temples. They are run, I think, by Sri Lankan Theravada Buddhist monks in the UK that I've never mentioned before. I didn't know about them. They were established in 2015, which is exactly when I left the UK and went to India, and have been travelling more or less ever since. So they're subsequent to my time in the UK, and you can look them up. They will come up on Google Maps, even if I think you just look for Buddhist temples in the UK. So there are probably more there now than when I left, 10 years ago now, at that time. So thanks for pointing that out, whoever it was that pointed it out. It's another location, another place where people can go. Now you will find these Sri Lankan temples, and I'm just generalizing massively here, I don't know these particular ones, or any for that matter outside of Sri Lanka. Not that I visited anyway. I have in India, in Bodh Gaya, but not in the UK. But usually they're very supportive of Sri Lankan communities nearby, as are Thai monasteries, and they are of the village, like I was talking about yesterday, they are of the village monastery nature. So they're more geared towards devotional practices and ritualistic goings on, ceremonies and festivals, and a lot of collection of funds and things like that, as well as receiving dana, gratefully of course. But don't worry about that, you'd still be very welcome, and they're still very beautiful places to visit with a wonderful atmosphere. And oh, this one's got something wrong with its foot. Good places to go and meditate. Like I think I've said before, anywhere that's peaceful and quiet, despite the tradition, no matter what the tradition, is a good place to take the opportunity to go and sit and be quiet and enjoy the atmosphere. Now, you've also got in the UK an abundance of churches. Now, they're not always open these days, but they're normally set in peaceful surroundings, so if the weather's okay, the graveyards around churches are very peaceful places to go and sit and meditate. They'll often have a bench. As long as you're not disturbing anyone, you wouldn't be if you're just meditating. Don't take all of your accoutrements and Buddha rupas and candles and incense to a Christian environment. That would be disrespectful. But take yourself, go and sit in the graveyard and meditate, or practice mindfulness, walking meditation over in a corner somewhere in a graveyard, or go and sit inside the church if it's open. You'll be left alone in peace and quiet to meditate. If you're in another country, go and sit in another temple of another religion. Now, when I was at airports, well, still now at airports, not here because they have a special place or rooms or seating areas for monks, but in non-Buddhist countries, in airports, I go in the multi-faith prayer room and sit there. And there may be, usually they're dedicated or they're for Muslims, but they call them multi-faith because everyone is welcome. So there's usually Muslims performing their prayers if it's that time of day, which it usually is at some point because they have 5. So go and sit in there. It's very peaceful, very quiet, very enjoyable place to meditate. So I don't know where that came from. Oh yes, because you've kindly brought some attention to a relatively newly established meditation centre or monastery or temple, of which I think there are 2. And you say there are a few around the UK, so that's useful for people to know. Venerable, I guess you practice Dhutanga, am I correct? In India we have Bhante Gayan Jayoti Mahatero, who practices Dhutanga, and he mostly lives in forest, and surprisingly tigers never attack him. Yes, tigers probably won't attack him, or anyone whom is not going to be a threat to them. They don't really see you as food. We don't smell good, humans. So, yeah, out of fear, they might attack you. Out of defending their own territory and their family, their babies, their offspring, they might attack you. But most creatures, even poisonous snakes, cockroaches and things, scorpions and things, avoid you. So when we're living in the forest, we are walking around mindfully. But that's not necessarily what Dhutanga means. It's been adopted in the Thai forest tradition and perhaps interpreted as being a wandering monk. They use the word tudong, coming from the word Dhutanga, which is a Thai word, tudong, for tudong monk, a wandering ascetic monk, a monk who doesn't stay in one place but wanders through the forests, as you are describing about Mahatero here, whom seemingly with the name like that probably is either Indian or Sri Lankan, and is just wandering around, a wandering ascetic, and that is okay. But that's just one of the Dhutanga practices. There are 13. Like I said, I can never remember them all, but they include keeping just one set of robes, 3 robes, eating just one meal a day, not eating anything other than what is offered in your bowl. When you go on alms round, going from house to house without skipping any. So if one house has particularly nasty food full of ants, you don't skip it, you still stop, you receive food, and you discreetly put it aside when you get the opportunity. You don't just go to the houses where you see all the nice food. So that's another of the practices, no choice. Not eating any food after receiving alms food. So if people then come to the temple later and you've sat down for your meal and you've started eating, if people then bring lots more food, another course, so to speak, however delicious it might be, you've finished receiving once you start eating. That's 5. Most of those, or a good part of those, are to do with eating and food. Then living conditions, where you live under a tree in the open air, in a cave, or in an empty building. I think that's 3 of them, as opposed to living in a monastery. So there's 3 more of the Dhutanga practices. Now I'm struggling to remember what the other 6 are to make up 13, but this is what a Dhutanga monk is. Any monk observing any of those allowable or allowed by the Buddha ascetic practices. So he doesn't allow, for instance, fasting for 30 days. He doesn't forbid it, but it isn't one of the allowable ascetic practices, because we are already fasting every day if we're just eating one meal and fasting for 24 hours between times. He doesn't allow, for instance, sleeping, avoiding sleeping for 30 days or something like that. But within those 13 Dhutanga, so here's another one, there is one called the sitter's practice, where you can make a determination never to lay down, even for sleep. So you even sleep sitting. So it doesn't mean staying awake for a determined amount of time or forever. It means you just never lay down to sleep. So you could lean against a wall or lean against a tree and go to sleep that way. So that's another of the Dhutanga practices. So that is what a Dhutanga monk is. You could say I'm a Dhutanga monk because at least half of those 13 practices I do observe. So I only have one set of robes, I only eat one meal a day, I only eat what I receive on alms round. That's a lot of them. I sleep on the floor in an empty building, as opposed to living in a monastery, in a community, a well-supported community. I just rely on local support and your support to live the way I do. So yeah, that is Dhutanga practices, but I'm not wandering. I've been here in this same place now this is my 3rd year. I've been here for 2 Vasas, over 2 years, and this is my 3rd year here now. So, but Dhutanga doesn't mean wandering. It means those allowable 13 ascetic practices, which does include not living in a monastery and having a fixed abode. So keep moving around in that sense, but not specifically walking through forests. That's just been associated with the word Tudong coming from the word Dhutanga, a Thai word coming from a Pali word Dhutanga. I find it odd that you make argues against Christ, without open deliberation. Everyone can believe what they want, but Buddhists have a weird way to go around any discussion about ontology or belief. Okay, so we don't have discussions on belief because the Buddha discourages us to believe anyone or anything, but more to see the truth behind all experience. So not even to believe teachers, not even to believe the Buddha himself, our teacher, with whom we've taken refuge, but to put into practice what he teaches us to experience for ourselves and see for ourselves through our own practice. Learn experientially rather than through doctrinal preaching, through teaching, telling, learning, theoretical study, but more through our own actions of body, speech and mind, and learning experientially. As far as odd that you make argues against Christ, no. I was brought up within a Christian environment, living with Catholic monks in a Catholic monastery, was a large part of my education from the age of 11 until 16. So 5 years secondary school education was with Catholic monks. And in a Christian country, I subsequently studied religions of all kinds. I practiced Christianity. I went to church. I took baptism, not involuntarily. I voluntarily took that later in life, not when I was a baby, when I couldn't decide for myself. I voluntarily was christened and then took confirmation. And I even went to the Vicar's College, or where they train priests in the Church of England, for further study with a view to becoming what they call an ordinand, someone who is considering becoming a priest in the Christian religion, the Church of England in that case. So having been brought up in Catholic Christianity, I moved into the what they call, is it right to call it Protestant? I don't know, but the Church of England version of Christianity, and studied it very thoroughly. So I don't think that is talking or discussing Christianity without having deliberated it, thought about it, studied it, investigated it, and put it into practice myself, firstly. But I do not and did not believe some of its doctrinal teachings. I could not put my hand on my heart, as one does, and swear the apostolistic creed, where you swear by Almighty God a belief in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and so on and so forth, and one and only God, a creator God. Because I don't believe that. I haven't experienced that, and I don't know that. So I can't say that. It would be lying if I was to say I believed that. So I, at that point, decided this is, for me, a lot of nonsense. Walked away from it. And had no religion. I still have no religion. I'm a Buddhist monk in the Buddhist Sasana, the Sangha, a huge religion, a part of this country and of all Buddhist countries, the religions of those countries, part of its constitution. But I don't consider myself religious, I consider myself Buddhist in the way that I'm following the teachings of the Buddha, having taken refuge in the Buddha, our teacher, in the Dharma, his teachings, and the Sangha, and become a part of the Sangha by renouncing worldly life and ordaining as a bhikkhu into the Sangha. So one wholeheartedly gone into this way of living, this practice. And you can call it a religion, because it is a religion in that sense, but not one that requires any form of belief or worship, prayer or worship, but merely reflection, practice, and acknowledgement. So I'm comparing Christianity, which after all came 500 years after the time of the Buddha, only when forced and have to do so in terms of questions like this. So it's a comparison. And I don't discount Christianity because it has an emphasis on generosity, on charity, on moral virtue, on being kind to others. It has many attributes in itself taken from Buddhism, or coincidentally that have arisen in Christianity and were taught by Jesus Christ as being a good way of living. So I have no criticism of that. I've only ever simply said that I don't follow it in the sense that I do not believe in aspects that require belief, that are the essential part of Christianity. They do have commandments. Thou shalt believe in blah, blah, blah. Thou shalt do this, and thou shalt not do other things, yes. But refrain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and lying is all that needs to be said. That covers all immoral activities that we can possibly think of, come up with. There is nothing outside that is essentially immoral. But in Christianity and many other theistic religions, it is considered immoral not to believe in God. It is heretical or sacrilegious to say, well, I'm a Christian, but I don't believe in God. No, that isn't accepted. You have to believe in God. You have to believe in the resurrection of his Son, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I prefer to have, rather than the Son, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the teacher, the teachings, and the monks and nuns, the Sangha, or the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. Instead of, because that is all experiential, instead of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In nomine Patri, Filii, Spiritus Sanctus. I don't discount it either. It may be so, and if it is, we're doing no harm if we're keeping the 5 precepts. Four, five. I'm doing that because, you know, Christians are required and have quite an emphasis on the drinking of wine. Now, I know in some churches and some modern versions they don't have alcoholic wine, but Jesus specifically speaks of wine in its traditional form. He turned water into wine. I kind of know scientifically how that was done, but I'm not going to go into that now. But you can do that with some water and some fruit and a bit of yeast on a hot day. Within a few hours, it ferments and it's alcoholic. It's called prison hooch. There are prisoners doing it in hot countries all over the world on their little windowsills. You get a bit of yeast from the bread making man in the kitchen. You get a bit of fruit juice left over from the morning breakfast. You add some water, put it in the sun, and by the afternoon, I've done it myself, in less than 8 hours, it's a wine. It's an alcoholic fruit beverage. These things can be done. Jesus walked on water. What water did he walk on? The Red Sea. Actually, it's a mispronunciation of the Reed Sea, so called because it was a lake, a huge lake of reeds, which became covered in water. And you could, like marshland, carefully walk across without much difficulty. But as the tide came in, or the water rose, because it was a tidal lake, being as it was so large, and the people following, they weren't able to walk underneath, through above on the reeds. The water rose, so they were subsequently immersed. There are explanations for all these things, but I'm not going to go into all of that. It isn't about comparison, and it isn't about arguing against, and it isn't about deliberation. This isn't a place for that consideration to be given to all other practices and religions, but we don't discount them either. We're just discussing what the Buddha teaches us, Dharma, and living within the parameters of the Noble Eightfold Path. But coming from a Christian country, I can assure you I had a pretty Christian upbringing and probably know the Bible as well as I know the suttas or the Buddhist scriptures, which isn't very well indeed, because I didn't bother much with the study of the Bible. I'd read interesting parts and useful parts of it, like I do with the suttas. I read interesting parts and useful parts of it when I need to, and put them into practice, try them out. And similarly, with the Bible, you can do the same. I found that, yeah, do unto others as you wish them to do to yourself. You know, treat your neighbour as you'd like your neighbour to treat you does work. But praying to be healed did not work, or praying to heal others did not work. They had to heal themselves. We have to heal ourselves by taking care of our bodies. Whereas in the Buddhist teachings, it is all about that, teaching us, giving us the tools, the knowledge, the wherewithal to help ourselves to become free from suffering in order to, by example, show others how to do the same and liberate others through that example. So on that note, we should leave it there until next time. If there's something useful, please use it. If not, just let it go. Be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.